On the 26th of November 2008, the Indian city of Mumbai was attacked by 10 jihadists at 12 locations, including the railway station, a cafe, and 2 5-star hotels, one of which was the Taj Palace Hotel, the most famous landmark in the city, apart from the adjacent Gateway of India. Hotel Mumbai, a debut feature from Anthony Maras, who co-wrote the screenplay with veteran John Colley, depicts the events inside the hotel, focusing on a few key personnel. Guests include David Armie Hammer, his wife Zara, Nanazin Boniadi, their baby son, and a nanny Sally, Tilda Cobham Harvey, and a Russian plutocrat Vasily, Jason Isaacs, all of whom will face their moment of terror. Amongst the hotel staff, there's a waiter, Arjun, Dev Patel, and the head chef, Oberoi, Anupam Kher.
Ladies and gentlemen.
There's no doubting Maris's talent for staging these horrible events, helped enormously by Stephen Jones Evans' production design and Nick Remy Matthews' cinematography, also making his debut feature.
Switch off the lights. Under the tables.
Terrorists have laid siege to the landmark Taj.
And Maras has seamlessly blended archival footage into the film, making the events even more immediate and horrifying. The 10 young terrorists are given instructions on their phone by Brother Bull, and ruthless instructions they are. The 4 young men who mount the attack on the Taj are played convincingly by Amandeep Singh, Suhal Nayar, Yash Trivedi, and Gaurav Paswala. And the point is made that these young men come from impoverished backgrounds. Their families are to be rewarded financially, maybe, but their reward is paradise. It's not easy to take seeing people being gunned down at random, and in fact, the first time I saw the film, I was a bit repulsed by it. But a second viewing made me appreciate certain aspects of the film. The fact that so many of the hotel staff stayed on to help the guests, and the sheer bewilderment of being caught in such a situation, and of course, the fact that it's been very well made. Graham?
Yes, it's certainly well made, this film. I mean, it's a really quite superb thriller in so many ways. You get the impression that the young director must have watched dozens and dozens of action films to sort of look with his cinematographer to look at the sort of the framing of these things and, you know, how to use close-ups against the wider shots and so on. I mean, it is quite impeccably put together. You do, as you suggest at times, wonder why on earth it's being made. What are we meant to sort of take out of this? And then as it moves on, and there are many stories to follow initially, and it becomes a bit confusing, but as the stories start to gel, you do realise that it's a celebration of the heroism of the people that were left there, particularly the staff.
Yeah.
I think half of the people that died in the hotel were actually staff members who were looking after and protecting the guests. So I think there's a sign in the hotel, and it's often repeated by the various people in the hotel, guest is God.
Yes.
And you certainly see them carrying out this notion, quite superbly done. But there's always this kind of philosophical underpinning idea that, you know, that affects you as you watch. Quite what is the point of making these things? And it's an odd genre that goes probably back to the Siege of Algiers, I think, which is many years ago. And we've had many films now of disasters, most of which do celebrate heroism at a kind of personal dash universal level. And that's what comes through pretty strongly here. The only problem perhaps is that you don't ever get to really know any of the characters because there's so many of them. But the good thing is that it's not the American characters who are celebrated, it's the Indian people who are celebrated here, and that's a fine thing, I think.
I just, you know, it's so troubling seeing this film. I suppose, you know, that random violence against totally innocent people, I think is really hard to take, and particularly when you know that it actually happened. But at the same time, I'm going to give the filmmakers, you know, full credit for this. I'm going to give it 4 stars.
I'm giving it 4 as well. I thought it was just a superb piece of craft, this.
सरदार से अच्छा
Well, I'd like to sort of go back to the beginning about the origins of this project. Where did it begin?
For me, it began with a documentary, Surviving Mumbai. It was made by an Australian team who were some of the first on the ground in Mumbai after the attacks. They'd been nominated for an Emmy Award for the project, and, you know, it just knocked my heart out when I saw it. I knew the Mumbai attacks as, you know, as most people did. You saw some burning buildings, distraught faces. But it wasn't until I saw that documentary that a whole sort of new avenue or a whole new sort of perspective on the attacks opened up, and that was the perspective of the victims who, you know, either didn't live through it, you know, which you heard about through others who did. And, you know, so after seeing this documentary and looking at some of their materials, we dug really deep and sort of thought, could there be a movie here?
We've got to talk about the casting. Armie Hammer, I mean, it was great getting him. He's
Incredible.
really terrific.
He is. You know, he shows real versatility, like someone who can go from something like Call Me By Your Name to Hotel Mumbai. You know, you couldn't get to, you know, two more opposite ends of the spectrum. And he'd sort of, you know, he'd rib me about it a little bit as well. He's like, you know, on the last film that I was on, like, you know, we're in the beautiful Italian countryside, like sipping wine and talking about philosophy, and you got me tied up on a floor and, you know, shoving guns in my face and that. But no, he loved it, and he's become a friend, and he was so generous to all the other actors. And that was a real thing with our film. We had a lot of people, a lot of actors who came from very different acting traditions, very different levels of experience. You know, Armie and Dev and Nazanin and Anupam and Jason, you know, have all got a wealth of experience. But then, you know, some of the gunmen had never been in a film before, and you know, so was the case with many other different people. And, you know, I think the actors really, just on the whole, you know, there was no egos. They just really got behind it, and they just showed up every day, ready to go and ready to put their hearts and bodies on the lines.
Tell me, I mean, because Stephen Jones Evans,
Amazing.
Production design, you know, I mean,
It's
really.
incredible. He had a huge task cut out in front of him. Like, the Taj is literally one of the most beautiful hotels in the world. It was no expense was spared in making it, nor since upkeeping it. It's truly a spectacular building. Everyone, if they get the chance, should try and go there one day. Poor Stephen had the task of like having to recreate this, you know, in different spaces, because again, the hotel being a functioning hotel, you know, there wasn't ever an option to go and shoot inside. We shot the exterior of the building, but for the, you know, all the massive sprawling interior had to be recreated. And so a lot of that was locations. You know, we spent a lot of time looking at a lot of different locations that, you know, could sort of match for the Taj. But, you know, and that was done in close collaboration with Stephen, because, you know, I'd send him photos, we'd look at different options. And, you know, if you can appreciate the Taj being such a big building, it's not like we could go to one place and film there.
Yeah.
He had to stitch together many different sort of worlds and make them into a cohesive unit. And to add to that, because our financing part of it came through Australia, a big chunk of it, you know, we shot a big portion of the film in Australia. So then he had to match what was done in Australia with what is done in India and have it seem like, you know, Armie Hammer runs out of one corridor and into another, and, you know, one is in Adelaide and one's in Mumbai, and they're months apart. But Stephen was incredible to work with in that regard.
It looks great, I've got to tell you. What was the most difficult part of making the film for you?
I think grappling with the issues of doing justice to the story of the survivors. You know, that was constantly, you know, I know it was a focus for me and also for our cast. And you know, it was something that we wrestled with a lot in the writing, in the rehearsals, in the production. What do we show? How far do we push it? But really, we let our guiding light be these interviews, and we just sort of said, okay, this is the experiences we've understood it from listening to all these, you know, all these multitude of perspectives. And, you know, it was a real honest attempt to try and put people in the center of this nightmare.
My kids upstairs. Do you have a family? Yes. And I hope to stay alive and see them.
No one's coming for us.
We go down the back stairs and straight out the service exit.
If they hear us,
we'll all die. We take our chances.